In 2017, the Nintendo Switch revolutionized the Zelda franchise and open-world gaming with a groundbreaking launch title, Breath of the Wild. A golden generation of Zelda followed this release, where the series achieved unparalleled sales numbers and reinvigorated cultural relevance. Many classic Zelda games became available through Switch Online during this period, and an arguably even superior sequel was released 6 years later with Tears of the Kingdom. This was the perfect time to revisit so many entries in the series and appreciate their greatness. However, wedged between these juggernaut Switch titles, we also received what I think is the most underrated Zelda out there, the criminally underappreciated remake of Link's Awakening. Despite positive reviews, I don't think people talk about this game enough or appreciate its genius, so we're going to do that here. In this video, we'll explore why I think this is potentially the best top-down perspective Zelda out there, which is sure to be a controversial opinion, and why this game maybe hasn't quite reached the popularity or fame of other Zelda titles. Please hit subscribe to support the channel, and let's dive in. Story spoiler warnings ahead. So Link's Awakening was originally released for the Game Boy in 1993. Despite the extremely limited hardware, Nintendo still delivered a full-size Zelda adventure with plenty of exploration, puzzle-filled dungeons, interesting characters, and most importantly, a fascinating and specific thematic vision that feels both very Zelda and unique to the franchise at the same time. Link's Awakening has one of the more interesting premises in a Zelda game. While sailing the open sea, Link is caught in a storm and his boat is struck by lightning. When he wakes up, he soon finds that he's trapped on the island of Koholint, which is supposedly nothing more than a dream of the Windfish, a mystical god sleeping in an egg at the top of a large mountain. The goal of the game is to wake up the Windfish and escape this dream by collecting magical musical instruments to play the Ballad of the Windfish. Simple enough, but I think the way it unfolds ends up being one of the franchise's most interesting stories. In many ways, this story is total whimsical nonsense, and in other ways it's deep and reflective, just like the gameplay design itself. I love how this adventure fully embraces the idea that it's a dream where anything can happen. Parts of this game are strange echoes of other Zelda games, or even wider Nintendo as a whole, with creatures like Chain Chomps and Kirby making an appearance, and certain characters resembling well-known Nintendo cast members. Most importantly though, I love the way this game experiments with the age-old "it was all a dream" twist. Instead of telling you this at the end of the game as a lame revelation that undoes all your work, the idea that it's all a dream is hinted at from the beginning and confirmed relatively early on. This creates a sort of cognitive dissonance for the player where you start to doubt your own actions or goals. You realize that if you do succeed, all of your new friends and an entire island could disappear. That sounds so dark that you also start to wonder if Link will find some clever way out of all this while still keeping everyone around him safe, or if perhaps the journey is not actually a dream and something else is at work. This dream setup creates interesting world interactions and game philosophies. For example, all of the bosses in the game are called nightmares and have strange names or titles. They are bent on stopping you from ending the dream or they'll all disappear. They even threaten that you'll disappear too if the dream ends. This game indirectly has many thematic qualities in common with Majora's Mask, meaning elements of dark philosophies or strange dreamlike qualities hidden behind colorful and cartoonish characters. These characters will often say thought-provoking lines offhand that question what it means for something to be real, what it means to remember or forget somebody, or what it's like to not know the world beyond what you see around you. I think recent Zelda games are missing these sort of psychologically dark or thought-provoking ideas. Sure, they still have evil villains and general ominous threats, but games like Link's Awakening, Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time, and even Wind Waker have these sort of subtle or unexpectedly mature undertones that add depth and gravity to the otherwise colorful and creative world around you. These messages help different ages and audiences of the game connect in different ways. Link's Awakening feels like stepping back in time a bit to when Zelda games were not massive open-world sandboxes, but rather intricately crafted puzzle worlds designed to communicate specific adventures and themes. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but Link's Awakening just felt super refreshing to me as I played. I talk about this a lot in my videos. I think modern games are often way too large and extremely unfocused, intent on just providing endless hours of kitchen sink gameplay rather than tightly crafted, purpose-driven experiences. Link's Awakening is the antithesis to the modern open-world genre. It's a tiny map of layered puzzles and secrets designed to guide you through a specific flow and narrative. This remake of Link's Awakening was released in 2019, so it's sort of awkwardly wedged right between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom at a time when massive open worlds and sandboxes were immensely popular, and obviously still are. In some ways, I think this hurt the game. I'm sure a lot of more casual or modern players thought this title looked too small, too limiting or too boring, or too cartoony and just never bothered to play. They felt that this was a step backwards, when in some ways, I think elements of this game are very forward-thinking and ahead of their time. Although I personally loved Breath of the Wild overall, I think it was missing certain aspects of Zelda that shouldn't be lost, and I'm not just talking about heart pieces and dungeon items. The core story in Breath of the Wild leaves much to be desired in my opinion, and the gameplay is often focused purely on open-ended exploration. Although the world itself is incredible and turns exploration into a type of story on its own, it doesn't always have much to say thematically. The story and pretense of Link's Awakening left me thinking about much deeper questions and ideas than many massive 50-hour cinematic open-world games have, because of the way it fuses gameplay with interesting narrative ideas and themes. I think part of this is also just my personal taste in games. For example, Shadow of the Colossus is one of my favorite games of all time. I love the dreamlike feel it delivers from start to finish, where you question what is happening and if all is as it seems. I enjoy games that tell a specific enough story to feel rewarding, while still leaving some elements open to interpretation. The interactive nature of games helps to drive this feeling home, with each player taking away something slightly different from the experience. This is also what made The Last Guardian unforgettable, even if the gameplay was pretty rough. Link's Awakening and Majora's Mask are great examples of these ideas, as well as games like Journey, Rhyme, The Pathless, and a special shout out to Arise, which is a super niche, but I think underappreciated story-driven indie game. Anyway, I also like that the ending of this game is somewhat open to interpretation. Again, spoiler warnings ahead in this section. After awakening the Windfish, you watch the island tragically disappear piece by piece, and your friends fade away one by one, a sharp contrast to the usual Zelda ending, which usually shows different areas now prospering. This is arguably the darkest ending in any Zelda game. Link himself wakes up still lost at sea, only to discover the awakened Windfish flying overhead, which communicates that the Windfish is of course real. However, there is also a shot of a seagull, which may or may not be Marin, a girl you befriend during your adventure. Marin said in the game that she wished she could fly away from the dreamland as a seagull, so was she in fact just a dream? Is the seagull coincidence, or some remnant manifestation or granted wish from the Windfish? Was the island completely a dream, or is the Windfish a powerful god with dreams that manifested a real island that Link crashed on, and now elements of it are still left in the real world? It's open to interpretation while still telling a specific story. This game just has such a specific vision it's trying to communicate, and I hope we start to see more of that return to Zelda without losing what made Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild so amazing in their own ways. Now, the beautiful visuals on display also really help bring to life the dreamlike qualities of this game. Link's Awakening has an extremely stylized look, competing with Wind Waker for perhaps the most cartoonish art direction, but it works perfectly here. The game has sort of a diorama or almost toy-like appearance, sort of what a child's dream or imagination might look like. The overall map size is one of the smallest in the franchise, but the art style, camera framing, and overall world design just make it work seamlessly. This world is brimming with color, subtle animations, appealing effects, and other visual flares. The overall visual fidelity and texture quality is also higher than most Switch games. I think this is also one of the most underrated games visually on the system. There are a surprising number of frame rate issues in this game for a major Nintendo franchise, but they don't really detract from the overall experience. The soundtrack also works in perfect harmony with these visuals. The music is sharp and crisp, with a pleasant blend of what sounds like real orchestrations combined with high-quality MIDI music. Some of the melodies also have sort of a dreamlike, whimsical quality to them, particularly the main ballad of the Windfish theme, which I think is one of the most memorable Zelda tunes, it's sort of hard to explain without just playing the game. There is a strong focus on music in this game in general as you search for magical instruments and even acquire your own ocarina and learn a few songs with magical properties of their own. I always enjoyed the focus on music as a pseudo gameplay element in older Zelda games, something I think the series has lacked for many years now. The older games always sort of implied that music has some sort of subtle magic of its own or power over darkness, which I think is a cool touch. Now, beyond the dreamlike qualities, the real nuts and bolts of Link's Awakening are also very solid. This is just a great Zelda game, with 9 full-size dungeons and plenty of interesting little world scenarios and collectibles in between. Personally, I enjoyed most of the dungeons in this game, though this seems to be a point of contention among fans. I think the game does a good job of making the overall structure or scenario of most of the dungeons somewhat unique, despite the limited isometric perspective. For example, in one particularly crafty dungeon, you have to find ways to move a heavy ball around the environment to smash down pillars to lower dungeon levels. In another, you have to track down and defeat 4 skeleton warriors in a labyrinth environment. There are interesting water and fire dungeons, per Zelda tradition, each with their own unique twists. I do think some of the dungeons rely way too much on raising and lowering colored block walls that limit your progression and exploration to different areas. This became tiresome when the mechanic starts to repeat too much towards the end of the game, and I agree with fans who kind of hated this element. Link's Awakening is also one of the only Zelda games that offers a 2D side-scroller perspective in some very limited segments. I think this edition is just bizarre because of how trivial and uncommon these segments are. They could have easily been left out entirely. Usually they amount to nothing more than trekking across a room or passage between floors or visiting some type of shop, but they do add variety and it's fun to see the world from another perspective. I also want to mention that I think this game perfectly recaptures what made the original so great while modernizing some key elements. I'm not old enough to have played the original on Game Boy, but I did play through some of the Virtual Console version just for comparison. I was surprised at how enjoyable the 30-year-old game was, even in its original form, but it also made me appreciate this beautiful remake all that much more. So what did you think of this game? Is this a criminally underrated Zelda franchise entry, or is it just a quirky, odd experience that only a niche audience will appreciate? Do you think it faithfully captured the original? Leave a comment for discussion, and please hit subscribe and the like button to support the channel. Thanks for watching.